Recording in progress. Thank you. Who is in charge? Is that you, Ryan, who allowed us to mute or unmute, or is it Tasha or Sarah Ann?
Hey, I'm unmuted.
There we go.
Kelsey Haddad is running the meeting in Tasha's absence. So
Okay. It's not usual you don't get to speak.
can be in observation mode all night.
All right, who we got? We don't have a quorum yet.
I noticed we don't have a code that we have to put in.
Yeah, we have a waiting room, and I believe she's letting people in from the waiting room as we speak.
Who is Weberly?
Chuck Weberly is going to be speaking to the Verizon cellular communications equipment lease agreement from that side of the equation.
Quick question before we go on, Ryan. I just looked through that agreement. We don't have an opportunity as the lessor to cancel. Is it entirely the lessee's right?
I guess I thought either party has that right. I need to pull it up now.
Well, there are termination paragraphs in two places for the lessee, but nothing gives the town to terminate, right to terminate. That may be a question for Kevin too.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the right page here.
We still don't have a quorum, so I'm going to not call this meeting together yet. Only 4 of us here. I know Al is going to be late, and Sam is out of town. So we'll have
Charlie be joining us? Or?
Oh, I haven't heard from him.
Oh, no, I'm home.
If we're down 3, there are only going to be 6 of us. That means everybody has to be here. So we're waiting for Sam. We're waiting for Ben, and we're waiting for Al, who's going to be a half an hour late. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're really waiting for Ben. All right, we can start the meeting. But we can't take any action until we get one more person. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Good evening, everybody. This is the October 25th, 2021 regular meeting of the Mansfield Town Council. And we will begin by asking Ms. Chain to call the roll.
Ms. Chain can't unmute herself right now, so if Kelsey's there, we need to make sure Sarah Ann is unmuted. She shows up as town clerk.
All right. Looks like we're a go. Thank you.
Great.
Osberger. Berthelot.
Here.
Bruder. Bertoni. Kotchenberger.
Here.
Moran.
Here.
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken. Thank you.
Mr. Fertoni will be joining us at about 7:30. He is late. I have not heard from Mr. Osberger, who has been ill, and Mr. Bruder is in another state. So we'll have to proceed with the truncated council. Um, we have a number of important items on our agenda, but the agenda itself is rather brief. And my goal is to let everybody go home at 9 o'clock or before. So let's see if we can make that. First item on the agenda is opportunity for the public. Mr. Aylesworth, is there anybody from the public in this group that I see, or anybody who has communicated with you?
I don't believe so, Madam Mayor.
Okay, then we will now move to your report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had our second and third sessions of the recently launched Mansfield Local Government Academy. Those sessions were on October 14th and 21st. We have another one coming up this Thursday. On the 14th, we focused on public safety, police and fire. And this past Thursday, we were at the DPW complex and also visited the animal control facility. And those sessions went very, very well. Positive feedback continues to pour in from those that are enrolled in the program, which is great. And looking forward to this week's session, which will focus on economic development and planning. I continue to navigate my analysis of the revised project and program funding requests relative to American Rescue Plan funded items that department heads have proposed. And I had asked, as I laid out in my memo, for department heads to consider how they might revise their original requests in light of the feedback that members of the community provided through the community input survey that we did in late summer. And department heads have done that. And I appreciate their willingness to make some changes where it was clear that the strength of public support for one thing versus another was there. And so next month, we're still on track for me to present to the council my own recommendations, but continue to work through that process. As the council knows, we recently did a census of sorts for employee COVID-19 vaccinations. We wanted to see where we were at this time in terms of overall levels of full vaccination in our employee ranks. And while it's a little hard to crunch some of the numbers because we have an awful lot of people that show up as part-time employees because, for instance, they might have used to work at the community center, but perhaps are no longer, for all intents and purposes, an active employee anymore, but they still show up in our system. They received a form and they were asked to fill it out. And so we basically had a much larger universe than is our true active employee base that received the form. So it's hard to go off of total percentages of the people that got the form that either are vaccinated or aren't vaccinated or even filled out the form. But what I can say with a high degree of confidence is where we're at with the town's full-time employees, of which there were 121 full-time employees that were asked to fill out the form. 94 employees have responded that they're vaccinated, so that's 78% of the overall population. 18 employees have indicated that they are not currently vaccinated. I believe 2 of those 18 may have received 1 dose or are on their way to being fully vaccinated by next month. But that's about 15% of the population of our full-time employee population that's not vaccinated. And then 9 employees or 7% that have not submitted the form or did not submit the form as of last week's deadline. We obviously want to get 100% census, so we're going to work working closely with Holly Schaefer, our Human Resources Director, to make sure that we get all the data points and then we can plan accordingly. As I understand, the council may have some feedback you wish to offer on that front, and so I guess maybe when I'm done with my report, we can discuss that. With respect to the production of the Dr. Martin Luther King mural, very happy to say that things are moving along. We expect that the mural will actually, which is being constructed with painted panels, the mural will be going up basically any day now, and expected that it will be up on the community center, Mansfield Community Center, by November 1st. That said, for a variety of reasons that the working group has been discussing, kind of ad nauseum, including concerns about event fatigue from the holiday, the Halloween weekend, and all the family events going on. That doing one more family event on November 1st, there might just be a little bit of a Halloween hangover, essentially. And we don't want, obviously, that to take away from a really important unveiling. And then some other things that basically might be competing with for the limelight. And so November 13th has been identified, which I believe is a Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. Program is being developed with the goal of making this a community event, really making this something enjoyable for people to come to and spend some time and commemorate the occasion. So more information will be shared as that program is finalized. But I didn't actually do a check on the grand total as of this morning, but we were very close at last check to our $5,000 privately raised dollars, crowdsourced funding for the mural. And those dollars are being matched. All the dollars privately raised are being matched dollar for dollar by Sustainable CT. So we certainly welcome anybody to support that project. And there's information on the town's website if they're interested in learning more and finding out how to do that. Construction on the new elementary school continues to proceed. As folks who've been driving by have probably seen, in addition to the concrete foundations that have been going in and the geothermal well drilling work, you're actually starting to see some steel beams go up now. And so it's really starting to take shape. But there's a lot of slow going at the front end, until you get the foundations in place, things can't really accelerate. So we're at about 10% completed, give or take. And the next school building committee meeting, I believe, is Thursday. Also, late breaking news, it was not part of my written report, but wanted to let everybody know that the governor's office has actually reached out to the town and asked about organizing a visit by the governor to celebrate the work of teachers, and is interested in using Southeast Elementary School as a site to celebrate the work of teachers. And of course, I think probably another benefit of doing that is it gives the governor an opportunity to highlight the construction of a net zero energy school building that's being constructed with about 2/3 state funding. So that's something else to trumpet and celebrate. So the program, I believe, is still being put together, but that's this coming Thursday morning. And I'm sure more details will be shared as they become available. But Thursday morning, based on the governor's office at least expressing interest to us, and that timeline may change, we're expecting that visit later this week. Just a few more updates. Want to make sure everybody's aware that we have a lot of Halloween and trick-or-treat activities coming up later in the week. On Saturday is the trick-or-treat in downtown stores, sponsored by the Downtown Partnership. I believe trick-or-treating kicks off at 3 o'clock. There's some events beginning an hour or so beforehand, but trick-or-treating starts at 3 o'clock and extends till 5. And then from 5 to 6:30, those that are having a good time and want to continue the good time can migrate over from downtown stores to the Mansfield Community Center for the annual Trick or Trunk, which is running an hour and a half from 5 to 6:30. So I know at least 3 young kids and their parents that'll be there. My kids are looking forward to it, and we'll be riding a sugar high for the next several days. And I think in the interest of time, I'm actually going to go ahead and stop right there, because a number of the other items in my report we'll be touching on as the agenda proceeds. So I'll stop there.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is reports and comments of council members. I would simply like to add to the report on the Martin Luther King mural that it's going to be really interesting and lovely, and I would urge people to make their final contributions if they can. We don't want to really hold up on this. So I'm hoping that people will go online and donate. I gather people are making small donations, so all it would take is a small number of people with a large donation, or a couple more with smaller donations that we can get there. Other than that, I don't have anything particular to report. Does any other council member have anything to report? Charlie, I'm glad to see you have joined us again. I know you've been under the weather, and I hope whatever happened, you are recovering from well, and welcome back. Somebody needs to unmute Charlie.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to comment on? Yes.
I just want to be brief. As we all know, and I wasn't here last week, but as last time Mr. Freudman has passed, and he was a very, very long time friend of mine, and I'm taking it as well as I can right now. But the town has lost a valuable asset, and I lost a very close friend. And so with that, I will say that thank you for allowing him to have been on the town council to serve. And I'm just sorry to see him go. That's pretty much all I have with that.
Thanks, Charlie. I think if you look at the recording of our last meeting, you will see some lengthy commentary on David's contributions to this community and to the council in particular. All right, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are two items, draft minutes and appointment to town committees. Mr. Aylesworth, did you say that there was another set of minutes that were going to be on this consent agenda? Or was that?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so would somebody like to move the consent agenda? Moved by Mr. Shuren, second by Ms. Berthelot. Any objections to anything on the consent agenda? Anybody intend to abstain? Anybody intend to vote no? The consent agenda has been adopted. So we have also I would like to congratulate the people who have been appointed to various boards and committees, and thank you for your service. COVID. Mr. Miller, hello, back again.
Hello, Madam Mayor, council members. Thank you for again having me here tonight. As always, we'll start with some surveillance information. We've had, unfortunately, a bit of an uptick in cases as of the 16th of this month relative to the data we've been putting out, and also there appears to be an uptick slightly in some of the state data too. Specifically, we went up to 50 cases as for the week ending, for the period ending 10/16 compared to 33 cases the week before. The good news is Mansfield remains below the state's state threshold of 5 cases per 100,000. So it puts you guys outside of the COVID response framework that the DPH has out there. But I think it's important to note that our neighbors, Coventry is in the red, both Windham and Coventry are in the orange. And then as the CDC measures the risk of transmission in the community on a county basis has placed Tolland County back in the highest level risk. This is actually up from last week, I think the 13th and 14th, when Tolland County was actually down to the moderate risk level. But unfortunately, it's jumped up to the highest at a little over 100 cases per 100,000. It's hard to say exactly what this is attributed to. Certainly, it's reasonable to speculate that it has to do with colder weather, more people going indoors. We still have a material percentage of the population that's not fully vaccinated. And regarding vaccination, Mansfield rates continue to tick up slowly. They continue to be kind of top of the heap here at the health district, and materially ahead of statewide numbers. We're seeing about a little less than 1% uptick each week. We're anticipating that once the emergency youth authorization extends to 5 and 11-year-olds, for Pfizer that will see a more material increase subsequent to that rollout. Let's talk briefly a little bit about boosters. Everybody's probably heard by now that last Thursday the CDC announced that all three authorized or approved COVID-19 vaccines are approved for boosters. Moderna is its extended authorization for boosters is similar in terms of eligibility for those who are eligible for Pfizer. Those 65 years and older, age 18 and older, if you live in a long-term care facility, 18 and older if you have an underlying medical condition, and 18 or older if you work in an occupational setting, which puts you at higher risk. For Johnson, and that's 6 months after the initial 2-dose series is completed. For Johnson & Johnson, a little different. Anybody who received Johnson, there is no restriction other than age, so 18 or older is eligible for a booster. And that's, again, 18 or older. And another interesting characteristic of the announcement is that they're providing for mixing and matching. If you choose that you prefer one of the mRNA vaccines over the J&J, then you can do that if you so choose. Or if you want to get Moderna over Pfizer over Moderna, you can do that too. I would suggest that if you're trying to make the best decision for yourself, you might want to confer with your doctor on that particular decision, given that the options that are out there now. Also, the health district will have some very limited capacity for boosters. Particularly in November, our immediate focus and allocation of resources continues to be for those who are not fully vaccinated among our population. In particular, kids age 5 and 11, we're ramping up to do some large clinics at school-located clinics amongst many of our school districts. We've ordered a bunch of Pfizer vaccine for that purpose. Interestingly, the dosage of Pfizer for pediatric doses is much smaller than the adult dose. And so we'll be starting those clinics November 12th, and we'll do a series of them through the following couple of weeks, and then we'll do corresponding second dose clinics exactly 3 weeks later at those same locations. We're working with all the superintendents, including Kelly Lyman, to coordinate these events and to get communications out to all the families. These clinics, school-located clinics, will be open to all health district families in the 10-town region to promote equity and access of these pediatric doses to these kids. That being said, there's going to be, as there is with the adult boosters, quite a few providers in the area that will be accessible for both boosters and the pediatric doses when they do become available. There's over 400 providers statewide, and in our area, the pharmacies are currently playing and will continue to play a role with the pediatric doses when they come out. Also, some of the larger healthcare networks will continue to be doing some clinics at many of their acute care hospitals, plus some private providers out there. So we'll be putting together a roster of those provider resources for our area, and we'll be pushing them out once it's available for our specific part of the state to our schools and to other community partners that need it. And I think I'll leave it there for now in the interest of time, and be glad to answer any questions anybody may have. Madam Mayor, we
You're
can't hear
muted.
you.
I had a malfunction and I shut it off, so now you can't hear. Questions? I know there are questions. Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. Rob, thanks for that report. I have a couple of questions, and then I want to go back to Brian's report and talk about our staff. So first, just on the question of booster shots, do you have a sense yet of when? I know the health district isn't involved in that provision directly, at least in a significant way, but do you have a sense of when healthcare providers that have done the bulk of the sort of ongoing vaccination work are planning on getting set up for all of that stuff? So I, like many people, I'm sure, went to peruse the options to schedule an appointment today and found that, for example, Hartford Healthcare hadn't yet stood up its back-end infrastructure to schedule boosters for Johnson & Johnson recipients, or for me as a Pfizer recipient, the ability to mix and match with my booster shot if I felt like it. So I'm curious if you have a sense of whether there's a state regulatory thing that needs to happen, when we should expect to be able to schedule en masse.
Yeah, so I think it is. It's really provider specific. Essentially the CDC has announced the green light, but there are some behind the scenes logistics that really need to be worked out. Allocation of resources, updating of standing orders by medical directors. I'm not sure as of yet whether the updated standing orders has actually yet been distributed by the CDC, and so I know some providers are reluctant to actually start administering, despite the announcement, until they've got a physician's signature on the bottom line. So I would give it a number of days. It's going to take it's going to take some days for the providers to ramp up. I don't think you're going to see any standing up the large mass vaccination clinics that we saw during the initial surge and demand. There are many more providers out there around the state right now, and this isn't as necessarily as time sensitive as the first round was. So I think you'll see a more gradual ramp up of this over time. And that certainly once some period of time has gone by, like it was this past summer, it'll also be relatively easy to get a booster shot.
Thanks. And then follow up from a couple of weeks ago, we had spent some time talking about the availability of testing in the area, and I'm wondering if you have an update on that and whether there's plans to expand testing options pre-Thanksgiving madness.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I haven't seen any progress on that issue at this point in time.
Okay, thanks.
Rob, is there anything we can do to help you put pressure on? You were talking about signed letters at some point. I haven't seen anything happen.
Well, certainly, Madam Mayor, your communication with our state elected officials may have some influence, and so I don't know where that has progressed, but certainly that's worth continuing to explore.
I believe we're going to have the governor in town next week, so maybe we can ask about that.
Timing is everything, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Shaken.
Sorry. So I just wanted to go back. Ryan talked about our staff vaccination status in his report, but then we moved on without questions of him. And so I think it's appropriate to talk about it now.
Please.
So Ryan and everyone, I think the survey shows pretty good news. I think it seems to me it shows that our staff is vaccinated at a similar rate at this point to the population, and frankly at a similar rate to what we're seeing in other workplaces where that are under the cover of the state's executive order, like the state. And in school districts, although I don't know exactly where Mansfield's school system numbers fall. Actually, that's a question, Ryan. Do you happen to know? Obviously,
98%.
okay.
According to Superintendent Lyman, 98% of Mansfield Public School employees are vaccinated. The remaining 2% are exercising the test out option.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just to state my opinion, I know we've talked about this several times over the last few months, and that's caused, Ryan and Holly to put this survey together to get a sense of where we are. I think it's time for the town to implement a mandate policy that will mirror, hopefully, the policy that we're asking of our resident state troopers due to their state employment, and the policy that we're asking our school employees, both at the Mansfield board and at the region, to comply with. I'm at a place in my interaction with people in the world where if I go to the doctor's office or the hospital, or that I expect that the person who's caring for me will be vaccinated. If I send my child to school, I expect their teacher will be vaccinated, and everyone, and our bus driver and everyone else that they interact with in that environment. And I think the same ought to be true for interactions with town employees, whether it's entering town hall to pay a bill or have a meeting with town staff, or more involuntary contact with town employees, like a medical emergency, or a fire, or a building inspection, or whatever. And so I would like to vote this evening to direct Ryan to set such things in motion. I don't think it's right for us as a council to write the policy for Ryan, and by any stretch of the imagination, we trust the town manager to manage the staff, and we manage Ryan. But I do think it's important for us to offer that direction, if it's the will of the council, and if folks agree with me, and that Ryan then, if we pass this motion, moves with some haste to get a policy in place. I don't expect, I should say, I expect that Ryan would give our staff time to come into compliance with that policy, since it will be new, but regardless, I think it's time for it. So I can make a motion right now. I can spark a discussion and make a motion when the discussion is over. If folks have questions or thoughts that we want to handle outside of debate, it's up to everyone how you want to handle it.
Since we don't have anything written in front of us, Mr. Shaken, would you make your motion, and I would allow a slightly more conversation than Robert's rules allows on the, knowing this is a very important topic and nobody has seen anything in advance. So,
Sure.
would you?
Sure. And I'll, as I'm saying it, I'll email it to folks. So you have it in writing in front of you, including Sarah Ann. So the motion is this. I move.
Ben, can you put it in the chat once you've made it?
Sure. I move to direct the town manager to implement a policy regarding mandatory COVID-19 vaccination for town staff, and to provide a report to the council at our next meeting regarding the implementation of that policy.
Ms. Berthelot, second? You speak to your motion, Mr. Shaken?
I think I've already spoken to it in general, so I'll reserve my time until we have a discussion at the end.
Okay. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Nobody? All right, briefly, Mr. Shaken.
Well, I want to give Ryan a chance maybe to speak, if he would like to, about just what his thoughts are as the person managing the staff. So just, Ryan, what do you think?
Well, I'm not entirely surprised that this potential guidance or direction is coming from the council, based on conversations that we've had, both in council meetings and sort of one-on-one and small group discussions. And I know that we're working to line up the town's labor attorney to also visit with the personnel committee on this topic in the next handful of days, basically as soon as we can pull that meeting together. Because I do think that Attorney Weinstock's guidance on this is certainly appreciated and valued. And while at the end of the day, this may not be a legal decision per se, or legal criteria might not be guiding the decision as much as, the values, I guess, would be guiding it. We obviously want to make sure that whatever we do, we understand the legal ramifications of what we're doing. And I guess what I would, add, just for the purposes of this conversation, so that members of the council do have that broader context. And I've alluded to this before, but I did follow back up with my counterparts in other communities across Connecticut just in like the last handful of days. And I know that with the exception of a small number of municipalities, most of which are cities, although I understand the town of Wyndham last month, I believe, adopted a mandate, a vaccination mandate for employees. For the most part, every other municipality I heard back from, both larger and smaller, so communities as large as West Hartford and smaller communities like Holland and Coventry, everybody seems to be in the same boat where, like us, many have completed a census of their employees to figure out what their current status is, to get a sense of what percentage of employees are currently vaccinated. But there also seems to be a tendency or an inclination, I guess, maybe the right word, to wait at this point, to hold off on adopting a mandate at the organizational level and wait for the emergency temporary standard that federal OSHA is expected to be issuing in the near future. You'll recall that back in early September, when the Biden administration issued a couple executive orders on this front, including the executive order that made it clear that federal employees would be required to get vaccinated. One of the things they kind of teased at that point was that federal OSHA would be coming out with some guidance relative to organizations with 100 or more employees. And so there's been a lot of speculation about whether or not that would apply to municipalities or not. We are an organization certainly with more than 100 employees, so I think there's good reason to think that it will. But rather than adopt their own individual policies, the vast majority, basically everybody except a couple cities in Wyndham that I'm aware of, are opting to wait and see what the federal OSHA guidance is that comes out. And I won't get into all of it here. Now we've talked about some of the practical considerations in terms of who bears what cost when the organization adopts a policy versus a mandate that flows down to an organization. So those are just practical considerations that I think Attorney Weinstock, would weigh in on and provide his legal reasoning. But certainly, I think bigger picture, I understand where the council hasn't voted yet, but where the council seems to be coming from this. I mean, clearly these are unprecedented times. Clearly, we want people to get vaccinated. Everybody, should share that goal. It's critically important that we do. It's just a question of, means and methods. And but I do appreciate where the council is coming from on this.
Any other comments? Ms. Berthelot?
Just to speak in favor of the motion, this is terribly important. As Mr. Shaken said, at issue here is the trust of our community. They need to know they're safe when they go to get their services, whether it's the senior who's getting driven around in the senior van, or whether it's a child who's being cared for at the community center. All of our folks need to be safe. We need, as a town, to do everything we can to make sure that people are, when they go for services that the town provides, that they know that we've done our best to make sure that the person they're interacting with is not carrying a deadly virus.
Thank you. I'll make a couple of comments on my own. When I realized that town staff are really a minority of the people who work for the community in our town. If you think about Region 19 and the school board employees with their extraordinarily high vaccination rate, it seems kind of irresponsible to let a small group of people who do interact with the public and with children as well go unvaccinated. And so I'm very much in favor of this. Mr. Aylesworth, you can structure the system any way that's appropriate. We just want to make sure it happens. Are we ready to vote on this, Mr. Shaken?
I, I don't have much to add in terms of a convincing argument, but just some process notes to throw in there for sort of legislative intent, if you will. First of all, obviously this isn't explicitly on our agenda this evening, and so I think it's important, since we're voting on it as a public body, that the public get a chance to weigh in. And so Ryan and others, that's part of the reason I think that we're requesting a full report so quickly on the 8th. I will also say I hope, as this personnel committee with Ken gets scheduled to talk about some of his legal thoughts about how to implement this policy, that it can get scheduled in such a way where we can give some feedback in advance of the council meeting as a council, whether you're a member of the personnel committee or not, to Ryan and Holly. So I think those are the two sort of process pieces. I just sort of want to point out, Tony mentioned school staff again, and I think it's interesting, given how many shared services that we have in our community and how the governor has structured Executive Order 13G, which is the order that mandates vaccination or testing for state employees and school employees, that there are people inside of our town hall, or people who are employed by, or whose supervisor is a town employee. So people who work for our facilities department, whose supervisor is Alan, who I see is on the line tonight. You know, if they work in the school system, they fall under Executive Order 13G and have been mandated to be vaccinated since the end of September. But if they work in the senior center, they're not. I see Sergeant King's on the line. Sergeant King's a state trooper. His employee is the state of Connecticut. And so the state troopers who work in the state trooper's office in town hall have been mandated to be vaccinated or be tested as of September 27th. And so it doesn't make sense to me that we would, understanding though that other municipalities haven't done this en masse yet, that we wouldn't also do it here. I understand that there are going to be some bumpy issues with the rollout, and I have full faith in Ryan to work them out with staff and to put a plan in place that will get us to compliance with this policy in pretty short order. And I look forward to hearing about all those details in 2 weeks, and I hope everyone will support the motion.
Are we ready to vote? All right, Ms. Chain, would you please call the roll on this? We've been joined by, since we took the original roll call, Mr. Fatoni and Mr. Ausberger have joined us, so let's call the roll on this.
Ausberger,
I'm going to abstain.
Berthelot,
Yes.
Fertoni,
Yes.
Kotchenberger,
Yes.
Moran,
Yes.
Shuren,
Yes.
Shaken.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion passes. Thank you, one and all. And thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there anything else you wish to say before we move on?
Not at this point. Thank you for having me once again.
Now, you're Eastern Highlands Health District, but you work in Town Hall. Does this mean you too?
Well, I mean, the Eastern Highlands Health District is a separate and independent agency.
Right.
We do occupy space within the town hall and many town halls within our health district, and our practice is always to follow the policies of the town hall we're hosted in.
Great. And I'm sure you and your staff here are fully vaccinated. I mean, if anybody is, you guys
are.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks, I hope.
Okay. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, Rob.
You. Okay, the next item is Sergeant King's first report to the town council in an official way. So welcome, Sergeant King. And Mr. Aylesworth, would you like to introduce this part of the program?
So I think the last time, I could be wrong, but I think the last time Sergeant King visited with you all was basically his grand introduction night. I think he started July 14th, and it was maybe the town council meeting a week or two later that he officially kind of met with you all. And it's basically been 100 days since his initial appointment as our resident trooper supervisor, and I thought this would be a good opportunity for him to check in with the council, share some of his observations from his first 100 days, Obviously, he's settling into his leadership role here, and so he can speak to what he's sort of using to an extent his management and leadership philosophy, but also talk a bit about what the relationship's been like with UConn and some of the fall semester activities. So, and obviously field any questions that the council may have. So for my part, I just want to say that I found Sergeant King to be a pleasure to work with. He's been very responsive to questions I've had. He's been very timely in his updates in terms of activities that are higher profile in nature, certainly anything that I may need to pass on to the council that could garner some public interest or attention. So I think he's proving to be an asset to our community. I think he's a good fit, and I hope he'll be with us for a good long while, even though I realize I have to manage my expectations because it's pretty infrequent that somebody in his position stays for what could be classified as a good long while. So without any further ado, Sergeant King, I'll kick it over to you.
Well, Ryan, thank you. Madam Mayor, appreciate you guys having me out here today. Ryan, hopefully I can put your mind at ease a little bit. We spoke the other day. I did actually just turn down a promotion to Master Sergeant Tuesday here in town. I've been enjoying my time here, and I thought that was the right move for myself and my family right now. I've been enjoying it down here, and I think I still have more work to do in this assignment. So hopefully with you for the time being, at least. So like Mr. Ellsworth said, I've been down here since mid-July. Spent my first few weeks and months mostly just getting to know all the staff within the town, as well as getting to know my own guys, my own sworn personnel. Obviously, I've been working with for several years. Some of them I was their FTO sergeant for, so I had the pleasure of kind of molding them into the roles that they've become. So that's it's very interesting to see, and it's a pleasure to see. Been reviewing our grants, our funding. We're currently at 7 full-time troopers, in addition to myself and Kristen. I know as recently as I think it was 2015 or so, we had 9 troopers. And when the state raised the fringe rate as well as the salary percentages, we went back down to 7. And I know some of that has changed in the years past. So at some point I'll be doing a more formal staffing study as far as percentages of days that they're actually here versus training and other things to make sure that we have the right amount of staffing levels to really secure the town with my folks, in addition to the supplemental patrol from Troop C. But right now, as far as my personnel, everything running smoothly. We do have one person still temporary assignment, who is Trooper Butler. He's here temporarily because the next person on our list is Trooper Ashley Fillion, who's been out injured with a broken shoulder from a call back in the spring. But he is enjoying it down here and plans on actually applying to be one of our full-time people should another spot open up. So no complaints as far as my personnel here, and it's been a pleasure to get to know Kristen on the civilian side. She's an absolute asset to the office. Other than that, I've been trying to meet with Ryan as often as I can to keep him apprised as to what's going on. I've made definitely an effort to get to know Chief Mitchell with the fire department as much as possible. I think in many times in emergency services, there's kind of a rivalry between police and fire. And while a friendly rivalry is fun, like a softball game, I enjoy working together closely. We're all emergency services. We need to be able to work together in conjunction, not in opposition or competition. So it's a pleasure to have that. I have a little bit of experience with the fire service prior to my time with the state police. So I think it's a great thing to have everybody intermingle. And I've been encouraging my guys to visit with them as well. I've also spent a great deal of time getting to know our schools. I've been in every school, met with the principals. I was elated to that the Southeast Elementary School is going to be taking over with Ms. Rodriguez there. I'm glad she's going to be staying on as the principal for the new school. She's been very inviting, and I've had the pleasure of attending some fire drills down there and getting to see the kids and give them high fives and try to get them used to seeing us in a positive manner down in the schools. And I'd like to continue that as we go forward. I had the same pleasure with E.O. Smith attending one of their fire drills and plan on at least making every single whether it's active shooter or shelter in place type, more police drills for each school as we go forward, because I think that relationship is important. And on that note, I'll be making sure I go to the E.O. Smith safety meeting next week to work closely with Hines and Lou DiLoretto on that. Really, the big question most of you usually have for me is regarding UConn and off-campus parties. Luckily, in my time prior to being the sergeant down here, I had already met John Armstrong for Dean of Student Life. So we've continued that relationship in addition to Megan Buda for off-campus housing referrals. I joined Mr. Armstrong at the beginning of the school year on our door-to-door visits for many of the known rentals, at least the ones that we have had problems with in the past. And while some of these renters have changed, we try to identify possible problem areas and meet that head on. So we go out, we have, most kids are very receptive to it. We kind of introduce ourselves and just kind of explain the standards that the community has for them, and as well as welcome them to town as residents. As soon as they're renters, they become residents of the town of Mansfield, not just UConn students. And it's generally very well received. They even get a little welcome bag from UConn with a pizza cutter, which was very popular, so I can't complain there. In addition to that, Mr. Armstrong and I have done follow-up visits as recently as last week, just anywhere that we have made referrals to, and other fraternity and other sorority houses we know, trying to revisit and re-engage, as well as try to get information about Halloween upcoming, as that's usually a pretty busy weekend for us with those parties. On the note of the fall and spring weekends, I did develop a standing operations plan, which I had approved by my boss, Lieutenant Gregorczyk, as well as the district major. While that's not of big note to the town, what it does allow me to do is it allows me to move my guys' shifts around as I need to for timing, as well as days on and off, to make sure that these weekend patrols are adequately staffed with resident troopers who know the town, who know the issues, and know what to do. So that's something that I definitely wanted to make sure was done, and luckily that went through with no issue. And what it really does is it allows me to spread the overtime on those weekends, so I'm not overworking particular individuals, and I can really spread it through the office to keep guys from getting tired out on those late nights. Any large scale parties or incidents, we do have referrals made to UConn. I have made 11 referrals thus far to Mr. Armstrong and Megan Buda regarding nuisance violations in large parties. Most of those did have nuisance violations issued. I don't have the exact number that we've given out thus far, but it has been several, at least at those 11 referrals, and we made 2 other student referrals due to student arrests, to include one more serious domestic violence case that I believe he was removed from the student body. So luckily everything worked well there, and reached right out with UConn. And on that note, I've been working very closely with Lieutenant Gilbert and the other folks over at UConn. And sometimes in the past, the state police has not always gotten along with UConn, and I have not had that issue at all. The UConn police in this office have been working great hand in hand, probably the most so with the presidential visit last week. So everything is kind of going smoothly on that front, which I'm very happy about. One thing I know is very important to the Mansfield and the community in general is a community policing aspect. So I wanted to embrace that and try to bring that into the office as much as possible. I'm sure at least the town staff here saw me out on the mountain bike in the bike uniform lots of the summer and in our early fall. I love the bike program. Several of my guys here are already trained in it, and I'm planning on trying to get the rest of my staff who are not, who are newer to town, trained in that. I think it's a fabulous opportunity to be out in the downtown area, the schools area, and it kind of makes us more approachable by to the citizens to just come up and have a conversation. It also allowed me a great opportunity to meet all the local business owners and other partners down in the downtown area. So very happy with that, and hopefully I'll be getting the rest of my staff certified in that. The Celebrate Mansfield Festival, we did have a booth there, again, right next to the fire department, to try to promote that relationship. I invited our recruitment and selections from the state to come up and join us, as well as our emergency services unit, who were, kind enough to send up one of our dive operators along with the airboat. So that was kind of well received by families. Neat to see some of the equipment and talk to the community as they come out in a more or less formal venue there. And I did see Mr. Aylesworth there with his kids, which was nice to see. My kids tried to come up, but weren't able to make it up that way. Other small community events we've done, I sent one of my troopers down to a birthday party. We had a mom reach out and said her 3-year-old turning 4 has just been enamored by police and asked if we might be able to stop by. And we greeted that as much as we could. And I sent Trooper Chicky down with a little grab bag of little police cars and things. And he spent some time with them. And we got a nice letter back just thanking us for our involvement. Trooper Strogoff is now Sergeant Strogoff, who has been transferred out to Troop D with his promotion. Which does mean we no longer have any DARE certified troopers in the office, which I'm not a fan of. So I did reach out to our statewide DARE coordinator. There is going to be a new DARE instructor course coming up in January, knock on wood. And as soon as that becomes available, I'll definitely be sending one of my folks to that class because I'd like to continue in that DARE program and that, school outreach, student outreach that develops those positive relationships. I know Sergeant Strogoff, when he was there, had a great time with those kids. They really bought into it, and he was even there playing basketball with them afterwards, and it's just a great opportunity for them to see that. So we'll be making that happen, and I know the middle school has already reached out about making that happen, so we will continue that. Restorative justice being an important thing to the town as well. We have been working with Katie Bell at Youth Services, and we know the Juvenile Review Board is going to be in development, full support on that front. And on that note, we've appointed Trooper Chicky as well to the Youth Services Bureau to serve as my police representative on that. We did attend the community academy last week with the fire department. I was scheduled to go. Unfortunately, myself could not make it due to the presidential visit. We had a lot of prep with that, but several of my folks did go out there. And from what I was told, was very well received. We centered on trying to make it a more interactive lesson there, where I had mock stations set up, allowing them to participate in mock traffic stops to see what it's like from the police side of the vehicle versus being the one stop, just to kind of see what goes through our head, what we're waiting for when you're sitting behind the wheel with the lights running. So just to kind of give them an education on that, as well as a medical station, kind of learning more about the field sobriety tests. So it seems like the hands-on approach was well received, and we'd like to expand that a little bit more next year, assuming that program continues. Like I said, I wasn't able to attend that due to our presidential visit. That was quite the event, at least for me. The district kind of left at least the Mansfield side of the operations plan up to me, as with working with my lieutenant and the district major. We had, I want to say it was 28 personnel from the state police, not including emergency services, which would be our tactical unit and our bomb unit. So I'd say all in all, we probably had about 50 troopers there in conjunction with Yukon Police and Secret Service, and that was quite an event to see. I got to be right on top of the parking garage as all the aircraft came in, and the troop chief lieutenant and I were the fortunate ones to actually have an opportunity to meet President Biden. So we did actually get to meet and greet and shake his hand and say hello, and thanks for coming to our small neck of the woods. So that was very interesting. So it's been an eventful probably 3.5 months, and I'm glad to have been getting my feet wet and ready to keep working. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. You got closer than the mayor did.
Yes, ma'am.
I could have waved at him from a distance, but congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, how many nuisance violations have been issued this year?
I would have to find the exact numbers. Like I said, it was 11 different events that came from, but I would say it's usually at least 2, sometimes 3, and I think the most 4 each event. So you're probably looking, while averaging those, around 20, but I could find the exact numbers for you, man.
Are you seeing events every weekend?
Knock on wood, it hasn't been too bad, but usually we will get at least one a weekend where we do write those nuisance violations, and probably at least 1 or 2 complaints that we go to every night, but not necessarily all those complaints are to a level where we're going to issue those violations.
Right. Ms. Berthel, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to share that I sat down with a friend for pizza on Sunday, I guess it was, and she had rave reviews for the Citizens Academy. She's participating as a whole. She thinks it's amazing, not just because of the free food, though she likes that too, but she thinks she's somebody who's lived in town her whole life, and she learns a great deal. But she absolutely loved doing the traffic stop stuff. I guess she got to use the radar gun, and it was great fun and truly well received.
Good. Like I said, I didn't want to just do a PowerPoint and have them bored. I wanted to get them involved up and doing things and kind of getting to see things from our side to give that breadth of experience.
And there should be a shout out for Kristen, because she was pulled over a lot that night as part of the simulation. So she got busted an awful lot.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
I might just mention in passing, there'll be obviously more discussion with the council in the future about this, but as you're all aware, there have been some citizen concerns raised about speeds and overall safety on our country roads. And I just wanted to let you know that we have had conversations with Sergeant King, relaying those messages and talking about ways, just like we're thinking about it from a public works standpoint in terms of what we can do with the roadways themselves to improve upon the situation. We're also talking with our public safety community, i.e. Sergeant King, about that, whether it's, mobile speed trailers that can help get the message out to remind people, you need to slow down and move that around town, or other strategies. But it's sort of early on in the conversations, but I want to let the council know that we are working with the resident trooper's office on that.
I have another question. Ms. Berthelot and I had talked about this in the past. There were some reports about an armed robbery on the square or in the store center. Can you tell us what happened?
They are still actively investigating that case. The small details that I got from it that were allowed to be, that can at least share here, was that there was 2 gentlemen outside the Mooyah Burgers area, and the suspects kind of approached our victim and asking kind of different questions. Hey, do you prefer Mooyah, or do you prefer the Insomnia cookies? And eventually the suspect reached out and grabbed a gold chain right off the neck of the victim and ran away from it. The victim kind of gave chase, chasing after him, and yelling to give it back, and the suspect turned and showed a firearm. There was no use of force. The firearm was not actually utilized other than the display of it, and the victim, once he saw the firearm, backed off, and that individual ran through campus back to north on 195 from the downtown area. The pictures were put out in the Connecticut Intelligence Center, as well as out in the news release, but at this point there is not a identified suspect. Suspect was a black male, late teens, early 20s. But other than that, it's still ongoing.
One of the issues that members of the council have faced for many years is the problem that people will say, what happened? There was a such and such crime committed, and many times we have no idea that it happened. How do you think you could keep us abreast so that we don't get caught flat-footed with citizen complaints on these things?
Honestly, Mayor, I'll hop in on that one, because Sergeant King did put that on my radar, and I couldn't tell you what happened on that particular day that sort of derailed my thinking, but I did have intention of making you all aware. They passed on that report to me. So I'll fully acknowledge that particular instance and things like that. Those are things that when the sergeant tells me about them, it would be my intention to report it to the council.
Okay, it is helpful because
completely understood.
Rumors spread very quickly in this town, and we're doing some door knocking, for example, and people say, "What happened, Dad?" And I say, "What? I never even heard about that." It's a little on the embarrassing side.
Yeah, that's more than fair, and certainly don't blame Sergeant King for that.
Okay, I'm not blaming anybody. I just
it's not the sergeant's fault.
Okay.
Well, Ryan, you and I can discuss whether you'd like me to, once I inform you, if you want me to send out a more generalized email that can go out to the council members as well as you, and we can try to figure out the best method of dissemination possible.
Yeah, I mean, I vaguely remember, I know there was an evolving situation, and we thought there maybe were some details that we weren't sure on. So it probably was a combination of things with a lot going on, but also I thought that there might have been more updates to come. And so I probably held off on the update at that point, thinking there was more to come. But I understand the broader point, and the mayor's absolutely right.
I mean, there's a mixed issue here. You don't want everybody to think that every little thing that every time a person gets a ticket, it becomes a major event, and don't want to raise fears when there's no fear to be, when there's no point. But notice is something else altogether. Okay. Is there anything else that members of the council would like to ask Sergeant King? I see no hands. So, Sergeant King, thank you very much. Thank you for coming here. And thank you for turning down the promotion so that we don't lose you all already. I'm very glad to hear that you're working well with the Yukon Police. That is a very major part of the job in Mansfield. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Okay, the next item is the grant opportunity from the Austin family. And we're making good progress. It's only 8:02. There is a chance we could get out before 9. So
now that you've said something. Very briefly, I'm going to tee this up to Pat Schneider and others within the land of human services. But as everybody I think knows, Taste of Mansfield as a program is still a relatively new program, and we're looking to sustain it in the upcoming year. And this is a grant application that for a little over $26,000, it would be sort of a low dollar, high impact opportunity. And as the agenda item summary lays out, some of the areas that investment would be targeted. Does not require a financial match from the town, although as is laid out in the material you received, there would be in-kind contribution, staff time and effort. So we definitely would have some skin in the game. But staff feels very strongly that pursuing this grant opportunity makes sense because of the many benefits that this program is providing members of our community. And with that, I want to turn it over to Pat Schneider, and she can elaborate.
This program would be in its second year. The first year was funded by Department of Agricultural grant from the Department of Agriculture, and has been highly successful. It's basically allowed people who are lower income to access fresh local produce through up to a 50% cost share of shares for local farms, as well as several
Is this my internet or is this Pat's?
Looks like Pat froze. Give it a second. Also send her a message to let her know.
If I can just ask while we're waiting, if somebody else, do people get a voucher? How do they access the benefit?
Oh,
Sorry.
I think she's there now.
Hopefully I'm back.
Yes. Okay.
I do want to say, if I freeze again, Dorothy is also online, and she can certainly answer, especially the very specific questions about distributions that have already happened. We're hoping to get funding for this programming because without it, it would end after this year. We have done some fundraising, but not enough to fully sustain the program for a second year. So, Dorothy, do you want to make any comments? Because I know you're on as well.
Well, just to kind of elaborate off of what you were saying before, we do have a 50% cost share that we did last year for 15 households for the CSA shares for approximately 4 or 5 farms. And then we also did approximately 5 different produce distributions throughout the season, out their harvest season, which we provided approximately over 400 bags of produce to different households. It included local squash, blueberries, fresh apples, peaches, just a variety of vegetables. And it does 2 things. It helps, as Pat stated, lower households that have lower incomes to get those fresh items, as well as helping the farmers. We are buying those produce that maybe they weren't able to sell at the farmers market, or that they just maybe have a little bit more extra. So we're able to help them have, profits from us buying that produce, as opposed to maybe that produce not getting sold, or we're getting into the households, so they can enjoy those fresh veggies. And It's been very popular. One thing that we're hoping to do with this next year is to have a collaboration with Click Kitchen in order to have maybe some classes, as well as have some demonstrations in regards to how to store the product, how to maybe do some canning, as well as maybe some flash freezing of the produce, so that those families can kind of have that produce to enjoy later on during the season, and not, have to get through that product quickly. So that's kind of some of the other things that we're planning on, that we'd like to do this upcoming year.
Sharon had a question.
Yeah, just
I'm sorry.
Kind of in concept, this is sort of like SNAP or food stamps, but with a specific type of nutritional benefits. Kind of, if I understand right, do people get a voucher or some kind of, how do they access the program?
So they would either get on our distribution list. There's an application procedure process, which is easy. And actually, it's been great. We partnered with the schools, because households that have kids that are on free and reduced lunch qualified. And so, and it was fairly easy. They just needed a letter from the school, and the school provided that. People who are on Meals on Wheels, I believe, were also eligible. So they made it as easy as possible. It also included things like local eggs, local milk. So it was, again, a benefit both for the exposure to the farms as well, and the businesses, local businesses, as well as to, for people to receive those items. So it's not quite the same as SNAP, because SNAP gives you the vouchers and you take them to the store. There are some SNAP coupons and some farmers markets that do accept them, but not all farmers markets or farm stands do accept SNAP.
You give them some kind of, how do they know, do they get something from you that they take in order to get the it actually is distributed through our office with the help of volunteers. So, and I also want to point out that there's a steering committee there's a lot of community involvement with this between the volunteers, as well as kind of cross-departmental, cross-agency people who are involved in it, which is nice as well. So it's, making some other types of connections. It's very much a feel-good program. And people have just loved it, getting everything from local maple syrup and honey to, beautiful apples and vegetables, fresh local milk and ice cream. So they've done a great job kind of showing the diverse types of products, and they're available locally. So,
how many families have been helped this year, do you think?
Dorothy can tell you how many families. I'm assuming exactly.
Our first distribution, we started out with approximately 54 households, and our last distribution, we had 77 households. That was just in produce distribution for the 5 distributions that we had. In our CSA share program, we had 15 households. We had to cap it at 15, and it was very popular. A lot of households wanted to participate in that program. However, we were not sure how excited households would be about the CSA share program. So that's why we started out with just a 15 household number to begin with. And, hopefully in our second year, we'll be able to increase that a little bit more.
Well, that was my second question. Will this $26,000 allow you to hold stable or increase, or what?
That's pretty much a hold stable number, correct, Dorothy?
It does give us a little bit of growth, right, as we want to be mindful of the staff that we currently have and how much our staff can handle in relation to wanting to grow this program. So we are taking a slight growth with this. We will be increasing our produce distributions from approximately 400 distributions to 500, meaning total produce that has been given out among those households, and then increasing our CSA shares just slightly. Again, we just want to be mindful of the staff that we have and how much time and the volunteers that we have as well that can commit to this program.
Mm-hmm. I will say it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work for the volunteers and the staff. So, you know, the department's very committed to the program because of the success and because of the fact that people are able to get fresh and local items, which is what's desired. It's not something that we can hold in our food pantry, which is, you know, shelf-stable items. So it is a way for us to kind of supplement that, which is wonderful.
Anybody have any questions? Mr. Shuren?
Just one more quick question. The Austin Family Foundation, is this a local foundation or is it?
Oh, yes, it's very local.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I believe it was the Austin
Very
Foundation.
local.
Austin Foundation that financially supported the playground by the community center, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And the state-
Downtown initially, I mean, the square, the development of the square. I mean, they've done a lot of stuff here in town and in the region.
Okay.
Jeffrey Austin was a lawyer in the area, and he
Yeah.
made his money on very low-income housing like trailer parks. He, as well as being a lawyer, so he had a somewhat mixed reputation, but he has redeemed himself, or his family has redeemed him by this foundation. The emergency room at the hospital is another example. So,
Can I?
go ahead.
I was going to make the resolution unless there were
Go
other.
right ahead, please.
I'd like to move effective October 25th, 2021, to authorize the submission of the grant application to the Jeffrey P. Austin Family Foundation for the Mansfield Farms to Family Program.
Is there a second? Seconded. I saw Mr. Shaken's hand first. Any further discussion? Does anybody wish to vote against this? Careful, Peter, don't scratch your head when I ask you for a negative vote.
That's what I tell my students. Never move when someone's looking at you like that.
Anybody wish to abstain? Thank you. The motion has been carried unanimously. I do hope that we get the money, and if we do, we should thank Eileen Austin and her foundation for the tremendous work they have done for the town. All right, the next item is the Affordable Housing Committee, to be followed by the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Mr. Bruder is out of town. Ms. Berthelot's prepared to make the presentation. So let's start with the committee. Ms. Berthelot.
Start with the motion.
Well, this is a recommendation from your committee. Do we need to have a presentation from anybody before the motion is on the floor?
I can introduce it, and if people have questions.
You introduce it. We'll see if there are questions, and then we'll vote. Then we'll do the resolution. Introduce the topic first. Let's see if there are questions of fact, and then we can do the motion. Okay,
I think I got it. So as you all recall, we created an ad hoc committee for affordable housing, and we worked together, and we worked with a consulting firm to create a plan for the town for affordable housing. That was back in July. Since then, the committee has met, and we've created the things you see tonight, one of which is the creation of a permanent committee, affordable housing committee. And the second is a ordinance which will create the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which will help fund the affordable housing in town, including administrative services for that, and maybe even potentially other services for people who qualify for affordable housing. I think that summarizes it.
All right, are there any questions that anybody has of staff or of Ms. Berthelot before we move forward? Ms. Berthelot, move your motion.
All righty, happily. I move effective October 25th, 2021 to establish the Mansfield Affordable Housing Committee pursuant to the composition and charge documented dated October 20th, 2021 from the Ad Hoc Committee on Affordable and Workforce Housing.
Okay, that doesn't need a second, although one of the things I would like to say is I understand your committee has worked very well together. Mr. Osberger, I assume you were going to second, although that's not necessary. Okay, any further discussion of the motion?
Can I speak to the motion?
Sure.
So I want to take the opportunity actually to say what the mayor just said, that this has been a fantastic committee, including Charlie and others. It's wonderful to work on a committee where there's such cohesion, such a strong belief in how important this particular mission is. It's on top of that, I also want to thank Sam Bruder, who's not here tonight, but who's shown great leadership and vision in shepherding this project forward. And I really hope you'll support this motion.
Anybody else? Is there anybody who wishes to vote no on this motion? Is there anybody who wishes to abstain? Hearing none, I will rule that this motion has been adopted unanimously. The next item is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Ms. Berthelot, would you like to describe that one too? And see if we have factual questions before we do the motion?
Part of the charge of the committee will be setting up this trust fund, since figuring out how to fund it. They'll be strongly guided by our plan, and they'll of course be bringing their ideas forward to us, but they will be charged in moving the plan forward.
This is the administrators of the trust fund you're talking about.
This is actually, so the people who are on the committee, but the money needs to go someplace. So this ordinance will create that trust fund.
Okay, and the process for an ordinance will require a public hearing. So what we are really doing at this point is scheduling a public hearing. But Mr. Aylesworth, did you wish to add to this?
Sorry, false alarm, no.
Okay, Mr. Shaken.
Just so I'm clear, looking at the ordinance, the committee is tasked with advising the council on setting policies for expenditures from the ordinance, but it's the council that would set those policies, and it's the council that would ultimately expend funds from the Housing Trust Fund. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks.
Okay, further questions? Are we ready to vote? Is there anybody? Ms. Berthelot, please move the motion.
Move effective October 25th, 2021 to schedule a public hearing at 7:00 p.m. on November 8th, 2021 to receive public comment on the proposed Mansfield Affordable Housing Trust Fund ordinance dated October 15th, 2021.
Okay, and it also does not require a second. Does anybody wish to speak to this motion? We've talked about a housing trust fund for years now, and this is the first concrete step we've taken to actually establish one. Mr. Shaken, did you wish to add something?
Oh, you said what I was going to say.
Okay. Is there anybody who wishes to oppose this motion? Is there anybody who wishes to abstain? Then I rule that this motion has been adopted unanimously, and with really strong thanks to the committee and to everybody who's worked on this, and to the staff and everybody else who has worked really closely with us, and also to the members of Planning and Zoning who have worked with us This has been a very productive joint effort and a really important step forward for the town. Okay, the next item on our agenda is Verizon Cellular Communication Equipment Lease Agreement. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as the council is aware, going back some time now, I believe it was circa 2016, Verizon had approached the town about installing cellular communication equipment in the Nash Zimmer Transportation Center. And things that actually, I think, progressed pretty far along when Matt Hart was still here, and there was a draft lease agreement in place. And for various reasons that I'm not 100% clear on, things kind of stalled out, and so they never really got across the finish line. At some point in the past year or so, Verizon re-engaged the town with its interest in pursuing this yet again. And so we've been navigating the various procedural hurdles to make that so, obviously reviewing Verizon's plans to understand exactly what it is they're looking to install, being mindful of the space it would take up on the parking deck floor, being mindful of the sort of streetscape, the aesthetic aspects in terms of what people would see outside the building. And of course, working through, a discussion of what the town's monetary consideration would be for that, for allowing that equipment to go in there. And so we reached the point we've reached now, where we have proposed a lease agreement for a 5-year period. Because the parking garage was constructed with state grant dollars, there was a negative pledge requirement, so we had to get Department of Economic and Community Development sign off on this, which they have. So the state has greenlighted this to move forward. The terms and provisions that have been negotiated are all included in your packet. I did want to address, I apologize, Madam Mayor, your question kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't prepared for it earlier, but having now had a chance to think through it again, you'd asked about a termination clause, that the lease agreement includes a termination provision for the lessee, but not the lessor. And that's basically because this is actually not that different from even a residential lease agreement when you think about it. When a residential tenant enters into a lease agreement, say for a year, the lessor, the landlord, often doesn't have the ability to evict them or move them out before the end of the 1 year. That's because of all the hardship it would cause the person that moved in. And so in this case, you have Verizon that would be installing equipment at considerable expense to itself, with an expectation that they at least get to operate in there for a 5-year period. And so if hypothetically, once this agreement was forged, we were able to tell them that we're terminating the lease 2 months in after they did all that construction, that would be a considerable hardship to them. And so it's possible that Attorney Deneen might chime in here too, but that's basically the long and the short of it, is that, we have the ability, obviously, to not continue the agreement after 5 years if we don't think it's working out in our favor, but they're guaranteed, essentially, for all intents and purposes, at least that 5-year window. And I also wanted to point out, in addition to Alan Corson, our Director of Facilities Maintenance, who's here, and Attorney Deneen, we also have somebody speaking or capable of speaking to the project on the Verizon side of the equation, and that's Chuck Weberly. I don't know if Chuck's actually a Selco partnership employee or if he's a consultant or contractor, but Chuck's been sort of managing this project, so to speak. And so if you have any questions, and Chuck is muted, he probably would need to be unmuted by our administrator at some point if you do have any questions specific for him. But that's kind of the flyover of this agreement. I think I hit most of the highlights I wanted to hit. Only other thing I wanted to say is when it comes to the financial terms, I had mentioned this to you all before. I did reach out to my counterparts that have entered into similar agreements with Verizon in recent years to get copies of those agreements so that we could do comparison or some comparative analysis. And these terms and conditions are consistent with what's been executed in other municipalities. And and the financial terms are an improvement upon what was originally proposed. So I'm comfortable with the document as written and would support you all authorizing me to execute it on the town's behalf. But Kevin, anything I missed? Oh, yep.
I have a further question. If you
Yep.
look at on section 2, initial term,
Yes.
it's for 5 years. If you under extensions, it's automatically extended for 4 additional 5-year terms unless the lessee terminates. So this is really a 20-year lease, and we have no rights to terminate anywhere during the course of this. It strikes me as, I understand the one-sidedness of it from the company's point of view. I would like to ask Mr. Aylesworth and Mr. Deneen whether this is standard procedure for a town.
I can say that the documents I reviewed, these extension terms were pretty consistent, but Kevin, I'll defer to you on this.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is pretty consistent. I do a fair number of these. I'm involved with one in Cromwell right now, and it's a fire safety tower that the various cellular companies hang their materials off of, and every single one going back to the early 2000s that they put these towers up. It's in order for them to, they're investing not just the physical material that's going onto a particular location, but they're designing their whole rest of their system around that interconnectivity on that. And so that, at least the way it's been explained to me and these other organizations have agreed to, it's that necessity of having the stability as they design their overall system that's important to the carrier side. So it is consistent with what I've seen in all the other contracts that have come up.
Okay, any other, Mr. Klausenberger, I know you have a question as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I have 2 questions. One on the length term. So Ryan notes that that this actually started a couple of years ago, but was never put into. This is the first time it was put into writing. Is that correct?
Correct. It looked like in 2016, a letter release was generated by the then town manager, Matt Hart, to Department of Economic and Community Development, asking for their approval to enter into such a lease. But where exactly it kind of broke down at that point, I'm not sure.
So when does the 5 years start? Does it go back to 2016 or so, which means we'd only have one, not even a year to see how it goes? Or does it, the first 5-year term start this month or next month?
It would be the, correct me, Kevin, is it the execution of the agreement or is it the pulling of the building permit? Which of the two? It's the
Make sure I've got my, yeah, it's the latter. The effective date is the signing, but the commencement date is when they pull those materials.
Okay, so it's not going to go back.
No, there was never a lease executed, and there were no materials put up there back in 2016.
Okay. Second question, this is what I had emailed you guys about. The agreement recalls for $2 million insurance for, and at least as of a year or 2 ago, our policy only had $1 million. Now, getting it $2 million may not be a big deal, but we have an inconsistency unless our policy, our insurance policy, already calls for $2 million per occurrence.
And to your question there, Peter, I do believe you're correct that it is a $1,000 limit per occurrence, or $1 million limit per occurrence. And I'd reached out to Chuck about that. He has a colleague in Verizon's corporate headquarters that would have to review that change. Right now, based on the communication I've had with Chuck, he's anticipating that reducing that down to $1 million per instance coverage won't be a problem, but he needs to confirm that with headquarters.
Okay, so right now, as written, I don't think this is going to be a big deal to get them down to $1 million or to resolve this. But right now we have an agreement, a draft agreement that's inconsistent with what we can do. So we could, assuming people approve, we could approve this. subject to, make that explicit in the
Can
approval.
be contingent on mutual agreement of that change. Yep.
Or we could put it on the next agenda, meeting's agenda, once that's been done. I sort of like the idea of moving forward tonight, but that's my question for everyone.
I want to invite Chuck to speak a little bit to this, if he's able to be unmuted, only because I know that, the council obviously needs to, provide its informed consent, and nobody wants to rush the council if the council's not ready to do that. But there is a little bit of a time sensitivity to this in terms of, if this project isn't green lighted soon, it kind of falls to the bottom of Verizon's pile. And then we're talking about another year before anything happens with it. And then that's another year, obviously, of lease money that the town, delay in that getting started. So I just want to point that out. But it looks like Chuck's unmuted. If Chuck, if you want to speak to that.
Yes. I would actually prefer if you did that tonight, if you took the vote with the contingency that the language be changed to the 1 million. That actually helps me go back to headquarters saying that we're pretty much all done and that you voted on it. So that would be my preference.
I will make that motion unless people would like to discuss it before I make it.
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna add, the motion is on page 42 on our packet. I'll add the sentence at the end. We supposed to add at the end. I move effective October 25th, 2021 to authorize the town manager to enter into a 5-year lease agreement with Cellco Partnership doing business as Verizon Wireless relative to the installation of cellular communications equipment to be physically located within the Nash Zimmer Transportation Center in accordance with the terms of the lease agreement as attached. And then this would be the new sentence, with the caveat that the per occurrence limit of insurance specified in paragraph 13 will be reduced from $2 million for injury or death of one or more persons to $1 million for injury or death to one or more persons, period.
Is there a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Is there further discussion? Mr. Kachenberger, would you like to speak to the main motion without, we know what the insurance issue is. Would you like to speak to the main motion?
Normally yes, but I think we've had a full explanation. I certainly support this, obviously.
I have a question, Mr. Aylesworth and Mr. Weberly. What is this going to do, and is the town going to get any benefit out of it?
Well, the town will get the benefit of revenue, and the town will also get the benefit of improved Verizon Wireless service.
And what is the improvement that we are going to see?
You'll see a more robust signal around the area of the garage.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Mayor, I just want to also mention, I think at one point, I could be wrong who brought the question up, but I know some time ago, the question was asked in terms of, has this been run by our in-house IT department? Just to make sure that there's no concerns about what this build out would mean, in terms of unanticipated consequences or unintended consequences. And I did have our IT director, Jamie, review the schematic and all of the supporting documentation that we've been provided. And he's very enthusiastically supporting the project from the standpoint of what it would mean for residential or resident benefit, and is confident that it will not in any way negatively interfere with plans the town has for our IT infrastructure.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the issue? Then I'm going to call for a vote. Is there anybody here who wishes to abstain? Is there anybody here who wishes to vote in the negative? Then I will declare that this motion has been adopted unanimously. And thank you, staff and Kevin and everybody who's been working on this. I'm hoping it provides better service a little bit beyond the downtown, but we'll see.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right, the next item on our agenda is reports of council committees. Finance.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. That's right. I'm sorry, Matt. We had, let me just pull up my notes for a second. We had, I don't have it in front of me. We had to cancel the meeting earlier this month, and we had a special meeting last Monday, simply to go over the agenda items. Primarily, two issues. Well, one major issue. One was simply to be discussed with the town manager and with the town manager, the finance committee director, and our outside auditor. The likelihood that we will file a request for an extension on one of the audit reports, which is due in December, with the internal expectation or hope that we will not need it, but to make sure that our request has been made if we do. And the primary reason for the need for this extension, which I'm told is common, but with other towns, is a combination of where the finance department was understaffed until very recently, the added work done by necessary for the very positive developments of the additional federal funding due to COVID, as well as the change and implementation of a new finance software system. So for those reasons, we requested permission, which the finance committee, well, not permission, but the finance committee certainly approved that an extension would be appropriate if necessary. The second point was we also had finished our discussion with one of our financial advisors, Bill Lindsay, on, this was in response to a couple questions over the last 4 months or so, on whether the town using municipal bonding is the best financially the best way for us to finance projects, as opposed to, for example, commercial lending. I'm glad we had the discussion, and I certainly learned a lot, and I think the unanimous conclusion was municipal bonding, at least at this point and going forward for indefinitely at least, is still the most economical way of borrowing for our long-term capital needs, rather than going to, say, the short-term commercial lending market. The third issue is simply setting the agenda to set up a time, which will likely be in December rather than November, for Parks and Recreation Department to come in and talk to us about specific proposals on how to address both silver sneakers and the larger issue of the deficit in the community center account. And then we will have our next meeting as currently as scheduled post-election. So we'll see when that will be.
Questions for Mr. Kachenberger? Thank you. Ms. Berthelot, personnel?
Thanks, Mayor. We did not meet this month.
Okay. Is there a report from Committee on Committees?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And we did have some appointments in the consent agenda. And we've already had the ad hoc on housing. So then, is there any comment on departmental and advisory committee reports? Anything on petitions, requests, and communications? Anything for future agendas? Ms. Berthelot.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm wondering if we can have an update sort of in the progress of the town's thinking of spending the money that's come in from the American Rescue Plan.
Yes, my plan is still, I'm targeting the first meeting in November. Worst case scenario to be the second meeting in November, where I'll actually present the formal recommendations to the council based on, as I was saying at the beginning of the meeting, all the different input from staff, the careful consideration of the community input that was provided from the survey. And just to kind of, I guess, maybe foreshadow things a little bit, we have $7.5 million that's been allotted to the town of Mansfield, but we have a period of time to draw down those funds. And so while I do intend to provide recommendations, basically for the full $7.5 million, part of those recommendations will probably be putting things in tiers. So those things that would be on my recommended list, let's say for the second half of that funding, we don't need to necessarily commit those funds just yet. So I'll have recommendations for the council to consider, but I do think that we can probably have a somewhat measured approach in terms of how that money is actually obligated, just knowing that this is a sort of dynamic environment and things are ever changing. And we obviously want to make sure we're still waiting on that final rule. That's the other piece, is that final rule. We have an interim rule from the Treasury Department, but until the final guidance comes out, there's always at least a small risk that something substantive changes between interim rule and final rule. And some things I think we're on sure footing, obligating funds for that now. We can be supremely confident that we're not going to find out later on.
Mr. Ellsworth, this is definitely not on our agenda for tonight, so let's hold off this discussion until we're ready. Anything else for future agendas? There's one motion left. Does somebody want to make it? Gonna be here all night? Go ahead.
I move to adjourn.
And Mr. Katzenberger seconds.
I second.
Is there anybody who objects? I wish to point out that I managed to get us done by 8:44, probably the earliest we've done in a long time, and we did a lot of good work. So thank you one and all.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great evening.
Take care, stay safe.